Hey guys, we're going to kick off today's call. We're going to be talking about really how to get yourself out of a rut, or if you're just not feeling up to getting the stuff done that you need to get done in your life. What are some tools that we use to really just get ourselves out of that headspace or that negative self-talk? And so we're going to have a discussion today, just a little bit about that, give you guys some tips, some of the things that we do, and we'll go from there. So, Jesse, if you want to kick us off and just tell us a little bit more about what you do when you kind of hit those periods of time in your life.
Yeah, so I think the idea is mind frame awareness. So like if you get yourself into a negative mind frame, you have to kind of train yourself out of that. And one thing that I've done for years is I've always committed to myself that every day I'm going to do three things that I don't want to do. Whether that's like, really anything. Like if I don't want to wake up and work out, I force myself to do that. And I think being able to get yourself into a mind frame of positivity through just mental control and being able to say like, okay, I'm in a negative spot, so what do I have to do to get myself out of that? And I think being in control of your own mind is a huge tool to be able to do that. So if you can kind of coach yourself and self-soothe your abilities to be able to just say, all right, I'm down. Like as an artist, that's something that we go through a lot is these lulls of inspiration or lacks of creativity or, just kind of wastelands in our own mind of what we're capable of doing. And that's something that being able to just say like, okay, I don't want to paint today, but I'm going to paint today, because you can just kind of force yourself to do something you might not want to do that's going to pull you into a more positive direction. For me personally, I think prayer is huge. I was talking to my wife about that earlier. Like some things that we both do to get ourselves out. And people call it, you can call it prayer, you can call it manifestation, you can call it whatever, just getting yourself into a point of gratitude can pull you out of a negative space. So if you're feeling really down on yourself and then you just stop and be thankful for what you do have and where you are at, that can kind of start pushing you into a better spot mentally, so then you can achieve more. So if you're in a bad spot, you're not going to be as productive that day. If you're mentally not with it or you feel like you're in a rut, because really a rut 100% of the time is just a lack of perspective. A rut 100% of the time is just a feeling, really. It's not a real thing. You can be having a bad day or a bad season in life, but if you stop and just be grateful for the things that you do have, you're going to shift that into a more positive direction. And then manifestation, if you want to say like, you know what, I want to do better for myself, and you can lead yourself doing some things that you might not want to do, but getting yourself into a better position through that, you're you're going to just notice yourself lifting out of that rut. And once you get trained in that, you can notice those ruts real quick. You can notice that
Yeah,
you're having a bad day, and you can shift that right off. And just like a light switch, turn it off and go on about your day, having a good day. And I think a lot of that is just gratitude, self-control, and making sure that you can have a better perspective on the situation that you're in. That's
yeah, for
my tool.
Yeah,
sure.
that's
Yeah,
great.
no, that's solid. I think too, like you wind up burnout's a big thing, right? Especially as somebody that you got a million things going on, or you're starting a business, or you have family, you have kids, whatever it may be. Burnout becomes the mental taxing aspect of that, right? So a lot of times, like, the things you have to do just keep stacking up, and so it's a matter of what is that period of time where you actually just step away from it, right? Because there's no way you can just go 100 miles an hour all the time. And so I think I think balance is super important um, when you're in those ruts. But
Yeah, and I think training too, because I do think that people get these lacks of inspiration, lacks of motivation, and things like that. But if you train yourself, just like working out, if you work out every single day, lifting the heavy weights isn't as hard. if you train yourself every day, you're not going to go through those burnout phases. They're not going to last as long. You know what I mean? Because I do think that being burnt out, especially in a creative industry like mine, I do think that being burnt out is a lack of motivation and a lack of inspiration and a lack of just kind of changing your perspective, opening your eyes, seeing the way forward. So I've heard a lot of artists specifically, a lot of entrepreneurs specifically, just get to these phases where they feel overworked. But if you're motivated, I mean, we've all been through stages of motivation where we feel like we could just go 10,000 miles an hour and then add another business to it. Um, and that's something where I think if you kind of channel your fuel and have the training, the internal training to be able to keep going through those things, I don't think the burnout really lasts as long. That's just my opinion, obviously, but
It's funny, Jesse, because I think a lot of the burnout, especially early, whether it be your career, your life, high school, college, you're in sports in high school, you're in sports, at that point in time, your focus on classwork. A lot of times you get in those ruts and you start to burn out, and it's hard to understand the cycle you're on, especially at a younger age. And over time, you just do it over and over and over again. And how long does that cycle of being in a rut last? And it's taken me a long time to be able to recognize the signs. I actually heard something one time. It was a therapist. She was talking. I don't remember exactly where I saw it, but she had said, you know, life and the emotions that you go through are a lot like a rushing river. And a lot of times when you have problems and they compound because you're in a rut, you start to look for negativity. There's something called the RAS. It's the reticular activating system. It's the part of your brain. If you have a car that's a red Accord, you're going to notice every single red Accords on the road. Before you had the red Accord, you wouldn't notice it. But
yeah,
when you're in that river and it's rushing and you have a problem and the rut seems like all ever consuming, what happens is that you start to bring more things in that river. You got rocks, you got limbs, you got fish nets, you got everything around you that's affecting you, and you start attracting more of that as you're in the rut. But she said, imagine yourself realizing you're in the river, realizing you're in the rut, pull yourself up on the side. And as you watch the river move by, you realize there's new water coming down all the time. And it was just a really nice philosophy to think about, recognizing the moment you're in the ruts and
yeah,
not overwhelming yourself with the obsession of you being in the rut. Say, how did I get here? And how do I work myself out of it? Because if you put that positive spin that you're already putting in motion that you want to get out of it, you're not going to attract all the things that come with it, where your car breaks down, you get a flat tire or whatever, you run out of gas, or you got that bill that you didn't expect. You're not so obsessed with everything, and then you don't continue to gutty sack yourself. And your time to pull out of the rut is a lot faster. And then a lot of times too with ruts, and this is something I've learned later in my careers, is that these ruts I get into, I found now that I can get in a rut for about an hour on something, but I quickly spit it and then I have a great week because it was a point for me to be able to pivot out of that moment. And it was a point of change. I don't know if it's manifestation, it's prayer, it's cosmic ability that I had that happened to me, but it's just so amazing. It's like that is, instead of it being a downward of your career or your life or your week or your day, it could be a moment of change that puts you back on the path you're supposed to be. And so just being self-aware of being on that cycle and just say, okay, I'm in a rut. That's okay. Let me figure out why.
yeah.
And don't look at it so bad. And
Well,
that's kind of where I'm at.
that's such a great point too, like the compiling factor. Because a
Yeah.
lot of people, when something bad goes wrong, you wake up and spill your coffee on yourself, and then you're running out of gas. You're noticing everything bad,
Yeah.
and compile and compile and compile. It weighs you down.
Yeah.
So that's a great point. Yeah, I like that philosophy a lot.
Yeah, other than going David Goggins on yourself and starting the bitch voice, cursing at yourself in the mirror, the one thing that's worked for me is, I guess the best way to say this is, what is one thing in your life that's hard to do, it's good for you, that you don't have a discipline issue with. And I keep that thing on the back burner for when I have that moment, because it happens every day. It's why I end up at the gym at a different time every day. I cold plunge at a different time every day, sauna at a different point every day, because when I find myself in the work mode, unable to just execute, I don't want to send more emails, I don't want to make more calls, or when you know that creeps in, the call reluctance, the whatever it is, not getting done what you know you need to get done, I go do something that's good for me that I don't have a discipline issue with to reset and then come back to it. So that's pretty much every day as I wake up and start executing until that comes in, which it always does. And then I'm like, all right, it's time to go to the gym, sauna, cold plunge, get back into execution mode. It's almost like I got to do something good for me that isn't the thing I need to do to come back to the good thing that needs to get done.
Yeah. That's
I think the underlying thing that we're all talking about too is self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
Because I was that person that just did the David Goggins thing. Like, I'm not going to sleep. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to go, and I'm going to fight through it. And eventually you hit a brick wall, right? Like, that's inevitable. And so I think it really comes down to like, what does work for you, right? Like, I'm in a period right now where I'm nonstop, right? So the thing for me is like making sure I'm eating good, making sure I'm going to the gym. And when I do have those days where I'm like, hey, it's Sunday, I know I have a ton of stuff to get done, like, it's okay. I'm giving myself that break of like, okay, I'm going to shut the laptop. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to go do something mindless, right? Or I'm going to go whatever it is. And so I think everything works. There's different things that work for everybody. And I think it's really a matter of figuring out, like, making sure you're self-aware. Like, are you in that rabbit hole and can you catch it, right? Because if you can catch it, then you're aware enough to know, okay, I'm going down this path right now. I'm going down that river. Like, if I can be aware enough to pull myself out, then that means I'm good, right? I'm not going to continue to propel down that road or river and then crash into something. So I think everybody is, I don't think there's like a one size fits all for everybody, right? Like, everybody's life is different. And so it may be different, but I think you have to find that thing or a couple things where you can recognize and then figure out, what is that step? Is it reading a book for you? Like, it's different for everybody, you know?
Seems like everybody on this call, right? We call it self-awareness, but how did you get it to begin with? You're talking reticular activating system, like all these terms. Where did it come from? At some point, you either read a book like Change Your Habits, Change Your Life from Tom Corley to understand how your brain works, to even get the self-awareness to start working on it. So I think it also starts with that, is doing the research, to figuring out how your brain works. Why do I think this way? Why is this happening? And then once you understand that, you can start to identify it, understand if you're being pulled into your amygdala, you're being emotional, and then recenter yourself back into your prefrontal cortex, where the executive center of the brain can operate efficiently.
Yeah.
Nobody performs under stress, right? And so, like, for me, I hit those brick walls and then I was like, why does this keep happening? So then I started reading, watching YouTube videos, finding guys like Dr. Joe Dispenza and things that were outside the box, where I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, why am I living like this? And then that's where you start. It's through education, but you have to, I think everybody hits those inflection points at different times in their life too. But I hit walls enough for me to be like, okay, this sucks. Like, how do I change this? You know?
Yeah. I think
go ahead, Jesse.
Justin made a great point. Just being like, knowing yourself is kind of the best way to know what you need to do next. You know, like, to that point, knowing like what your brain is and who you are is going to tell you what to do next. You know, if you know yourself, you know what books you need to read, you know how to self-assess your mind, you know how to kind of figure out like, okay, where am I lacking? Where do I feel good? Where do I benefit myself? You know, and both Jared and Justin's point, having that pivot point where, like Justin said, you know, cold plunge, workout, or like Jared said, you know, just pull yourself off the river for a minute, even if it's sit down, meditate, you know, have a cup of coffee, like to Justin's point, do something good for yourself that you don't hard for you to do, but you want to do it, you need to do it, and it's good for you, you know? So I think that those are both like beautiful exercises to be able to have to just shift, you know, like just
Yeah.
turn.
Yeah.
That's all it is too. It's a shift. Nothing actually has changed in your life in a matter of 30 minutes, right? Unless you like some catastrophic event happened, right? Most of the times, like Justin said, you're sitting at your computer, you're working, and you're just trying to push through, and you realize your productivity is just nothing, right? So it's like a lot of times it is removing yourself and then recognizing it, doing whatever you need to do, but then you realize nothing changed except my mindset. That's it. But yeah, you need to figure out what those triggers are.
You know, it's funny because I think we've talked about, I think a couple videos that we have done before too, about how there's not one right way of doing it either. You know, I mean, you know, you could David Goggins yourself to death, and that might have worked for David Goggins and maybe a select few, but it doesn't work for everyone. So everyone's watching this video. I just want everyone to know that's like, this didn't come after listening to one video and, you know, thinking that you can put all the work into that one thing you heard. It takes time. And to Justin's point too, you got to find what works for you. It did probably took Justin a little bit of time to figure out, you know, it's the workout, it's the sauna, the cold plunge. It's at different times of my day to break it up. And then you get done with it, you feel rejuvenated and you grind. Some people, you like Jesse say, might just sit down, meditate, have a cup of coffee. You have to try things, and it's about trial and error to understand how your body operates. You know, it's kind of funny. I actually, in the last 2 months, have had 7 big issues that came up with a business I've been starting. And it's funny because each time these problems came up, they weren't too dissimilar from themselves. But the first time it happened was really bad. And then I worked myself out of it, and good thing happened, right? And then it shortened and shortened and shortened and shortened to the point now when these problems come up, it's fine. It's all right. The solution will be right around the corner. And it's just because I trained my mind to think like that. If I was thinking the old way, all the problem on the 7th time is probably worse than the problem of the first time. I just changed the way I thought about it. But again, for everyone watching, it's going to take time. It's about trial and error. You don't go to the gym one time and have Arnold Schwarzenegger's chest. It's not going to happen. It takes work. It takes modification. You have to understand yourself and be self-aware. So do not get discouraged. We all find our way if you're willing to find your way.
This might be a little off topic, but you just made me think of that, Jared.
Yeah.
Of, you know, you start to go through life and have traumatic, like bad experiences, and then at some point it happens again, and it's not nearly as bad, even if it is worse, because you identify the similarity and that you survived the first time. So something I've really been working on is when I have a first, is just knowing that all that fear and anxiety is because it's the first time.
Yeah.
And then it's very difficult to do, but to say, okay, all the other firsts when it happened again weren't so bad, so I'm just going to not make this as bad.
Yep, exactly.
I think it's perspective, right? Like you see people that have gone through really, really hard life stuff, and the little stuff that upsets other people is just, it's not a big deal, because you realize when you've been through major life stuff that is what we consider bad, right? And that's a whole nother discussion we could go into about, are things good or bad, or are they
And
just
we will.
Yeah, we will. But ultimately, like we place our negative or positive thought on things, right? And that's the only reason that thing is actually positive or negative, right? So it's our perspective. And in what you just said, Justin, is like, the first time something happens, it's new, you don't know what to expect. So you wind up overanalyzing and putting so much negative pressure or angst on that situation. And then when you realize you get through it, you're like, oh, well, I just worried for 30 days for like nothing actually. So eventually the goal is like what Jared was saying is like, in my opinion, your goal shouldn't be to just change overnight. Your goal should just be to shorten the window all the time. So the thing that you were sitting in that bad place for 30 days, if it happens again or something similar happens and now it's 25 days, like you're winning. right? Because you're literally making progress and you're shortening that window. And I think the people that are the most successful are the ones that can shorten those windows, learn from it, and move on. They don't attach that negative emotion to that and avoid it. They understand that it's just part of their journey in whatever they're going through. And so I think the shortening of the windows is really the goal, you know, as you're finding whatever your niche is, or you're finding, you know, your cup of coffee or your meditation or your gym workout, whatever it is, like, how do you shorten the windows? I think that's always got to be the goal of getting out of those ruts.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think putting yourself into hard situations kind of helps that too. You know, if you put, like, you know, Justin earlier was talking about the cold plunge. I mean, that's something, no matter what he does in a day, if it's a little hard, is it as hard as what he already did on purpose? Cold water. I think putting yourself in those stressful situations eliminates the daily stressors, you know, because you're used to something difficult. So I think being in difficulties kind of hardens your armor and gets you into that training mode of getting out of those tough situations.
Yeah, something I heard Hormozy say is like, if you want to make $100,000, you got to get used to losing thousands of dollars. If you want to make millions of dollars, you got to get used to losing hundreds of thousands. You want to make, you know, and the ladder keeps
Yeah.
going. So really, if you really want to end up in a great place, you should be chasing gigantic failure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope. That's
Yeah.
what
I
I
think everything.
and too. Like, I've learned more from my losses than I've ever learned from my wins.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
that's the hard part. Like, in my opinion, when you're going through those in that moment, is really trying to figure out, yeah, it sucks. You can sit in that for a little bit, but if you're able to completely change your perspective on that, you realize that, yeah, your failures, the things that you really screwed up, or like that you thought were the worst possible thing that could happen in your life, wind up being the things that teach you the most. And so I keep going back to perspective, but I think that that's a massive thing. And we're humans, we're going to attach emotions to things, but how do you shorten that window and try and learn from all that, you know?
Yeah.
That's a good point too. Like, going back to prayer, you know, when I found myself in some spots where I felt like, okay, this is a struggle. Like, this is an actual real struggle. I think just stopping and asking, what is the lesson here? You know, what can I learn from this? I think that's going to put you in a better mindset to where you can change your perspective. Because if you know, I mean, that's what, when, you know, my kids are in wrestling right now, and I tell them, I'm like, you either get a win or you get a lesson, you know, and that's something I think that's very powerful for that type of situation, because they're devastated when they lose, but at the same time, they're better because they did. They're better because they went out there. And so that's something that I think everybody should be able to stop and think, like, okay, if I'm not winning right now, what am I learning?
Yeah.
And put yourself in learning mode, you know, just shift over and say, like, what can come out of this? What good is going to come from this bad time?
The mind is spinning. It's like, it just brings me back to money. Like, I'll never forget the first time I lost a big trade trading. For me at the time, it was a big trade, and it hurt so bad because I actually made the right bet, but it went the wrong direction too quickly, and I got margin called out and like went to zero. I lost the whole account. It was like $1,500, and then 10 minutes later, it was where I thought it was going. So you had to like know you made the right trade, but eat the loss at the same time. Like, losing that $1,500, I'm telling you, destroyed me more mentally. Like, my heart was racing. I was depressed. That was worse than the next time I lost 35 grand. Then I lost $500,000, then millions. And losing millions of dollars didn't feel as bad as losing that 1,500.
Yeah.
Listen, Justin, because you saw the script before, you know how this
Yep.
game works.
Yeah.
And that experience. And so that we harken back to, you know, when I think I talked about this, I've had a couple clients of mine, or people who I know through clients, young guys commit suicide. And that problem when you're young to us guys, we're, our 30s and 40s, and well, I'm in my 40s, but what happens is those problems that you have then problems get so much worse. You just know how to handle them differently. And it's just so sad to hear why these people go through this struggle and make this permanent decision. It's just, every problem or every situation you're in life is an opportunity to go forward. You just have to just reframe the mind, and then the big problems down the road don't seem so bad.
It would be awesome if when you were young, you could stop and make a
Oh,
list of problems and then read them later on and just be like, "Really? I was worried about that 1500,
yes,
worried about this $1,500 loss, or I was
yes.
worried about this." Like,
That
yeah.
would be the coolest thing if we could find a way to transport ourselves back to our younger years and just tap ourselves on the shoulder. Justin, $1,500 is okay, buddy. Trust me, you're good. You're like, what the hell? Change everything. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to be the tap on the shoulder, right? That's the whole purpose of this. We're trying to tap you guys on the shoulder and guide you guys and let you know it's okay. It's all going to be okay. Embrace the journey. That's the whole point of this.
And
I think that
gratitude.
I was just thinking,
A lot is gratitude. Like being able to stop and just be grateful for everything that you're experiencing, whether it's good or bad, just be grateful
Yeah.
that you're through it. Like that's, I
that's
know
I was gonna say that's a hard thing, right? Because sometimes you do get so deep in that, like, that rut where it becomes very difficult, right? But that is really, you can't have gratitude at the same time that you're having those negative emotions. Like those two things will never work at the same time, right?
yeah.
But it is hard. And I think it is important, like Jared was saying, like the whole reason, like not the whole reason, but one of the main reasons that we've decided to do the Men's Collective is all of us on this call have been in the position where life has literally just knocked you down to nothing, right? And there wasn't a lot of places to go to hear from somebody that was similar, right? A lot of times you can go on TikTok or YouTube or wherever you're going and you can hear people's stories. But one of the big goals with what we're doing here is like to be able to give men a space to say, hey, we're all going through something on some level, right? Everybody's at different inflection points in their life. So how do we create a space that gives men a place to raise their hand and be like, hey, I'm going through this. Like, how do I get out of it? Or how did you get out of it? Right. And so I think that's a piece that we're missing. And I think it's a driver, and why we're even doing this call is because like there is the other side of it always, right? Even when it doesn't seem like there is the other side of it and you feel like there's no way out of this, like you're still living. You're still moving forward. And so, but it's hard to see that. It's hard to have gratitude. It's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's hard to pull yourself out of the river, but it's possible. And like sometimes you need support to be able to do that. And I think that's a major factor that everybody's identified, but nobody's really done anything about, And I think that's a main driver for what we're trying to do here,
Drew, I just want to say one thing though, too. I think everyone individually, all those young guys, maybe you're a little older and you just had a horrible divorce or something of that nature. You owe it to yourself to pull yourself out of the river. I think that's the most important thing. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your younger self. You'll owe it to your older self. You owe it to yourself to pull yourself out of the river. And that's it takes the first step of just acknowledging you're there.
Yeah.
Big time.
That's beautiful.
Thanks, Jesse.
Is that where we end this, or we keep going here?
I think if you could end it on that last clip.
Yeah.
I thought nobody said anything.
I know, like
I think
I
we
saw
all just paused.
on Justin's eye.